Oh, yeah. Okay. So I want to welcome everyone. Thank you so much. Shavua Tov to everyone. I want to thank Michal Liba for helping out and getting Shani. So thank you so much. And thank you all of you who have joined live. It's really Baruch Hashem to show Hakara Satov to our speakers who come on. So I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Shani Gerlitz is an orthopedic physician assistant at the Long Island Jewish Valley Stream Hospital and a certified chaplain in the United States Chaplain Corps. Wow, so interesting. She has always had a deep love for learning and sharing Torah. She has given several shiurim at the Shaaray, Tefila, and Torah, and she has also hosted challah bakes, Tu B'Shvat, and Purim presentations for Northwell Jewish BERG. She is the creator and host of MEDRASH MOMMY, a weekly parsha podcast on Spotify, and is in the middle of her third cycle of completing Nach Yomi. Wow, so fascinating. Shani lives in Lawrence with her husband and 4 sons. She has always found great joy in spending whatever free time she is connecting with people and sharing fascinating insights into Torah. So Shani, we feel so grateful. And I'm really interested how you're, have you worked in the United States Chaplain Corps? Like, does that mean like, what does that exactly mean? Sorry, it's just so fascinating to me.
It is. Well, during COVID, obviously, it was a very traumatic healthcare worker experience, and just feeling very ineffectual as a spiritual support to people who were kind of unable to connect with any kind of spiritual guidance or loved ones. So I saw an ad in one of the Jewish papers for the Chaplain Corps, and I took the course. I can't tell you that I do a lot. I do implement a lot of the skills with my patients, but I'm a full-time working mommy, so there's really not much time to spread myself.
Even thinner, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you, Shani. Thank you so much for coming on this morning. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I just want to start with, B'zchus Nashem Sekanios, Ga'ilu Mitzrayim, B'zchus Nashem Sekanios, Asidu Higael. It's just incredible to see how women take their time and just daven, and the tefillos should penetrate the gates of heaven, be received and Latova. So the topic today is I think it's very interesting, and I'm very excited to share my information with you. We are in the times of Geula with our parshios, and hopefully that we will merit to very soon all be finally out of this exile. But the magic, the magicians, the Khartume Paro, we first come across magic in Bereshis, when Yosef claims that somebody stole his magic goblet. And, it's interesting. The brothers, the Shvatim, don't look at Yosef and say, like, what are you talking about? There's no magic. So it seems that there was a very big prevalence of magic in biblical times. And here we see again in last week's parsha, we have the magicians of Paro, that they're kind of battling with Moshe and Aaron, and they're bested by Moshe and Aaron because we have powers greater than magic. We have Hashem. And as we go through the parshios and we get into Parshas Mishpatim, we are told outright, Machashefa lo tichya. It is impossible for the existence of a witch. And what is witchcraft exactly? In Sefer Dvarim and Parsha Shoftim, it goes through and outlines 10 different types of witchcraft. I'm going to try to screen share so you can see the pasuk. I don't know. Okay.
I'm going to make you co-host. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, 1 second. Just give me a second. I'm going to co-host you.
Because I like to follow with the text inside myself. So if.
There you go.
Okay. 1 second. Okay, here we go. Are you seeing what? Okay. So, where are we? Okay, it looks like I am missing a part of my screen share. Sorry about that. So in Sefer Shoftim, Parsha Shoftim, Lo yimatzeh b'cha ma'avir b'no uvito ba'esh. This is the practice of the molech. It was a horrific form of infanticide. to appease the gods, and they would burn their infants alive. A kosein ksamim is someone who interpreted omens, a ma'onin, a menachesh, and a machashif. I'm going to explain each type of witchcraft. Chover chavarim, someone who's casting spells, a shoel ov, v'yadoni, and dorish esamisim, different kinds of necromancy. So a kosein kasamim is someone who can interpret different types of omens. So this is general witchcraft. It's brought down in Sefer Yechezkel that King Nebuchadnezzar had different types of kasamim that he used to determine whether or not he should attack Yerushalayim. He threw arrows. He had different truffim. He examined the liver of a sacrificed sheep. So that what they would do is almost like a form of like palm reading. They would look at the markings on the liver or look at the color of the blood, and they would be able to make determinations. And unfortunately, but as Hashem wanted, he realized that he should go and attack Yerushalayim with dire consequences of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. A ma'onin is someone who can like onin from an ona from a time. So this is someone who can figure out different auspicious times or inauspicious times. It could be that there was some kind of body fluid involved or an immoral act, but they would use this sorcery to use different seasons to their advantage to divine. A menachish. So this menachish is the phrase that Yosef used with his goblet, and it was like almost like a fortune teller. They could see the future and derive omens and meanings from different events, maybe the activity of birds or animals. And a machashiv is just a general term for witchcraft. Now the chover chavarim, this might be one of the more interesting. The word chaver is a friend, and chibur or chabura is something that we bring together. So this would be like potions. When you think of the witches in Macbeth, boil, boil, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. This was incantations. They would maybe get some demonic forces or powers in these spells and concoctions. And it could also be that this chover would be an attachment to an animal, where they would possess an animal and get that animal to do their bidding, almost like how Voldemort and the Bacilli, the snake that was at his side and would always do his bidding. So that kind of witchcraft. And then there is the conjuring of the dead. So we have the Ov. You might be familiar with the Ashes Ov that we'll talk about soon. This was somebody who can channel somebody, an ancestor, an Ov, an Avot, and they would get their armpits to transmit sound, and it would come in a very low, deep voice. And the Yadoni was somebody who would use maybe somebody who was a famous Yadoni, like you maybe wanted to get George Washington and a historic figure to speak with them and connect with them. And the Yadoni was, it was an interesting type of thing. They would use a bone of a Yadua. And this Yadua animal is this fantastical creature that wasn't exactly an animal and it wasn't exactly a plant. It had some kind of umbilical cord that connected it to the ground. And it had this humanoid type of figure, and it would scream. It was very violent, and you had to somehow kill it by disconnecting it from its umbilical cord. And one of the bones would be a channel for the witchcraft. And then there was this general necromancer who would go sleep in a cemetery and collect information from dead spirits. So lots of different types of witchcraft. You could either specialize in one or all. And what's interesting is that the Zohar says that Lavan was the world's greatest sorcerer, and that when Yaakov, when he's telling Leah and Rachel, we got to get out of here, Lavan switched my wages, aseret monim, that he switched it 10 times, that it was actually reference to the 10 types of witchcraft Lavan used on Yaakov, and he had to like battle almost against Lavan. So when Yaakov tells Esav, I lived with Lavan in Lavan Garzi, I was able to withstand all of Lavan's witchcraft. Do you think you're going to overpower me? Now, the next greatest sorcerer, you may be very familiar with him. He was a contemporary of Moshe Rabbeinu and probably the grandson of Lavan. It was Bilam. And Bilam learned his sorcery tricks of the trade from his ancestor, his grandfather Lavan, and Bilam was a kosein ksamim. He had he knew when that time, that one time of the day that Hashem is angry. So he was good with the seasons and the times, and he knew when to curse. He also was able to do some kind of flying. He was in Sefer Yoshua brings down that he was coasting Summon. They were conquering Eretz Yisrael, and the headband of Pinchas had Kodesh LaHashem on it, and when Pinchas exposed those letters of his headbands to Bilam and all the flying, kings that were trying to battle against Bnei Israel, they fell to the ground and they were able to kill them. So lots and lots of mystical witchcraft in Tanach. Interestingly, the only person mentioned outright in Navi was Izabel as a witch. So I have it here, if you can see on my screen share, Yehoram and Yehu, they're talking to each other. Hashalom, Yehu, are you okay? And he says, Ma hashalom, what's good about it? Adznuna Izabel imcha, your mother Izabel, who was an immoral woman who probably used her immorality for idolatry. Ukshafeha harabim. So it outright says that she was a witch, and it's purported that she bewitched her husband Achav, who was a very wicked king, contemporaries of Eliyahu HaNavi, and she bewitched him to submit to her bidding. She was very, very powerful and evil queen. But I would say that the most famous incident in Tanach involving witches is the witch of Ein Dor. So Shaul HaMelech, Shmuel Beis, Shmuel Aleph. Shaul HaMelech and Shmuel Aleph is towards the end of his reign. We know that he disappointed Hashem. He failed a few tests, and he was no longer worthy of being king. And Shmuel HaNavi, who was the Navi during his lifetime, told him that you failed, and Hashem's going to take away your kingdom, and he's going to give it to someone else. Shaul didn't know who that someone else was, but had very strong suspicions that it was David. He was chasing David, very distracted by that almost like obsession of his. And the Plishtim at the time, who were kind of like the nonstop, not so different from today, the Plishtim of the time, saw this window of opportunity that David had escaped and was a very mighty, famous warrior in his own right. And he was actually hiding among the Plishtim, and Shmuel HaNavi had died. So there was a very vulnerable moment in this Shaul's reign, and they took this opportunity to wage war. Now, Shaul sees the legions and the masses camped out and ready to attack, and he panics. There's a small army, not much different. You can see history just does not change, and it keeps repeating itself. But Shaul is really, really scared. He doesn't have Shmuel HaNavi, and he goes and he tries to get information. Is this going to be something he should go and fight? Is this a suicide mission? What should he do? And he tries to find Nevi'im, and nobody gives him an answer. He tries to find Nevi'im who can do some kind of a dream work. They put like certain papers underneath their head with for sleep, and it has letters on it, and the letters light up, and it would give them an answer. Nothing. He went to the Urim V'Tumim, and no answer. The Urim V'Tumim was the breastplate that it was actually special papers in the Kohen Gadol, and it would also light up different letters to unscramble them to give you insight. And Shaul's really, really panicked. So what do you do when you panic? Your desperate men do desperate things. So he decided that he would go and find a witch. Now, this is a little bit of an uncomfortable thing, because one of the things that Shaul had done as his mission as a king was eradicate witchcraft. So there weren't really many witches left in town. And if they were not going to present themselves to the king. The second thing is that he's the king who wanted to get rid of the witches. How is it that he's going to go? And it's almost like so hypocritical. So he dresses up as a commoner, and it so happens there is a witch left in the town of Ein Dor. Now, Ein Dor, maybe if you remember from growing up, the show Bewitched, Samantha and her mother, who then the typical, stereotypical mother-in-law, Endora, is probably where they got this name Endora from. The witch of Endor was able to kind of escape the, the whole eradication of witchcraft because her son was Avner. Avner was Shaul's general. So she had a little bit of a protexia. So Shaul goes, find me a witch. And Avner's like, oh, look, I happen to know one. So Shaul disguises himself and goes to the witch. And there's this whole back and forth. I don't know, I'm going to get killed. Shaul's going to find out. And you're going to put my life in danger. Shaul assures her, don't worry. I'm going to make sure you don't get killed. And she relents. Now, she's like, who do you want me to conjure? So this is the necromancer. She is the Balas Ov. So she is going to bring up Shmuel Hanavi at Shaul's request. Now, when Shmuel Hanavi comes, the witch shrieks in like shock and fear. Now, if this is something that she does habitually, she shouldn't be so panicked. But there's something you can know about witchcraft. When the sorcerer summons the dead, there were three things that would happen. One is the sorcerer was the only one who would see the dead person, but she couldn't hear, or he couldn't hear the dead person. The summoner would hear the summons, and the summons would come upside down, their feet up in the air. Now, when Hashem created man, man is more dignified and greater than animals, and we walk on our 2 feet. But when you use the koach hatuma, when you use these impure sources, they kind of reverse that whole natural order, and you would be upside down. Now, Hashem was not really happy about having Shmuel Hanavi come through these koach hatuma from witchcraft, so he sent Shmuel Hanavi himself. And when the witch saw Shmuel Hanavi, she saw that he was standing up, and she realized this is not a commoner that's in my presence that's asking for a witch. She realized this was Shaul HaMelech. And there's a whole back and forth. Should we go to battle? What's going to be? And Shmuel Hanavi tells them, listen, it's over. It's over. This is the end. Go die an honorable death, a far better place that you go to than you have ever known. Take your fate and do it the right way, and Hashem will forgive you. And Shaul collapses on the ground. The witch ends up giving him a meal of matzahs and a fatted calf, and that is exactly what happens the next day. Shaul goes to the Plishtim, and he is killed. But this is probably one of the most famous events in Tanach, a whole entire parak pretty much dedicated to this incident. Now, in the Talmud, the Sanhedrin had to be knowledgeable in witchcraft. This is so that they could apprehend witches or sorcerers. There are stories in Tanach about a Rav Oshaya and Rav Chanina that they were able to use a white magic to create a calf. And Rava, he was able to make like a golem, like the Maharal of Prague in the 1600s created a golem, and it's apocryphal. I don't know that it's real or not, but he used Kabbalistic terms from Sefer Yetzirah, and Rabba, it says Rabba bara Gavra. Gavra is a person. Rabba created a humanoid, and this could be where the origin of the word abracadabra comes from. Rabba bara Gavra, or Evra Kadibra. I've created as I've spoken. We know that the spoken word really has a lot of power, and it could have created these entities. There is a story of Rav Chesta and Rav Huna that were on a ship that was sailing with a witch on it, and she wanted to sit down at their table, and they didn't want her at their table, so she did some kind of a curse, and the ship stopped. It didn't move, and the Chachamim gave a counter curse, and the ship started to move again. And the witch kind of like realized that she wasn't going to get what she wanted, and she left them alone. Interestingly, there is an incantation in the Gemara Psachim that is like a way to ward off, almost like a segula or an invocation to get rid of witches. And I have it here on the screen share. I just thought it was fun and kind of like, random. But they say, Shaaray chamime b'tzuka bezaya lefumaycha neshei decharasha karach karchaychi parach parchaychi ibadur tavlunaychi parcha zika lemorika charata denatikku nashem kashvanios adchanani v'chananchi v'lo esi lagai hashta de sisi lagai karchanani v'chananchi. I know it just sort of sounds like a witch spell itself, but it's basically a way to get rid of witches, that your mouth should be full of awful things and all your spices scattered in the wind, and you shouldn't be able to do any of your witchcraft. Your hair should fall out. It's kind of just it's just a really cute little thing that I don't think we should be needing in our time, but I guess was prevalent during the times of the Gemara, that this was a real thing for them. Now, the Talmud, we have Rav Shimon ben Shattach. Now, Rav Shimon ben Shattach was a Nasi, that is a prince. He lived during the end of the Hasmonean dynasty and during the second Beis Hamikdash. And during the time of Rav Shimon ben Shattach, there was a big problem. There were the Purushim and the Tzedukim. The Purushim were people who believed in Torah Sheba'al Peh and Torah Shebeksav, and the Tzedukim, they only believed in Torah Shebeksav. So they were gaining a lot of political power, and they were starting to corrupt society, the courts. And Rav Shimon ben Shattach was a very strong Nasi, and he wanted to restore order and really kind of get everybody back on track. And he was able to do this because his sister was Shlom Sion. She was married to King Yanai, and she was very righteous, and she helped her brother restore the ethics of the courts. And also was responsible for instituting the first public education system. And also there was divorce. There was a lot of problems with the divorce proceedings, and she helped restore, with her brother Rav Shimon ben Shattach, she helped restore that order. Now, it's very, very interesting. You guys, this is a Nishmat group. We don't really know who wrote Nishmat, but it is believed that Rav Shimon ben Shattach was the one who authored Nishmat. And there is a very long passage in the Talmud Yerushalmi about Rav Shimon ben Shattach, and it goes as follows. Rav Shimon ben Shattach lived in Ashkelon, and he had a lot of Talmidim, and there were two people in that town at the time who had died on the same day. One was a tremendous tzaddik, and the other was
bothering you from Leib?
What?
A little bit.
I'm sorry, is there a problem? Okay, so
no, Shani, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So two people died on the same day. Now, as I would have it, one was a tzaddik, and one was this Baya Bar Mayan, who was the town tax collector, a very corrupted and very unpopular gentleman in town. And obviously the funeral procession for the tzaddik was grand and honorific, and the one for the town tax collector was clearly, he didn't have much of a turnout. And suddenly there's a pogrom, there's a big commotion, and the two coffins get exchanged. And there's one student who's standing by his Rebbe's coffin, and he makes sure it doesn't get mixed up, and he's protesting. You're burying the wrong guy. You have the wrong guy. You're giving the wrong guy a beautiful, that's the town bad guy. You can't do this. And nobody listened to him. And he was really, really disturbed. That night he has a dream, and his Rebbe comes to him, and he's like, Rebbe, what happened? Why did you have a really, so like, why was your funeral like so, it was just not as nice as the other guy. What did he do? The Rebbe says, don't worry. The reason why I didn't deserve an honorific funeral was because one time somebody was denigrating the Chachamim, and I didn't protest. So this was my punishment. There's another Gemara that says that it was perhaps that he didn't put on tefillin properly, but he was able to atone for his infraction by having a dishonorable funeral. And this Bar Mayan, one time either he had a big meal prepared and nobody showed up, so he gave it to the poor, or he dropped a piece of bread and somebody poor picked it up and he didn't embarrass him. So this was how he got his payback. Now, he showed him around. He's like, look how beautiful it is over here. And he's like, oh, and look at that guy. He has the hinges of Gehenna turning in his ear, and he's going to be like that until Rav Shimon ben Shattach dies. He's like, what? What do you mean, till Rav Shimon ben Shattach dies? Right? He's a big tzaddik. Why is he doomed to such a awful death, to such an awful afterlife? And he says, because he was supposed to eradicate the witches, and he didn't keep his promise. And he's like, well, go tell him so that he can right his wrong before he dies. He's like, he's not going to believe me. He says, take out your eyeball. And he pops out his eyeball. He's like, put it back in. He puts it back in. He's like, okay, if you don't think he's going to believe you, try that and he'll believe you. So he goes to Rav Shimon ben Shetach and he doesn't need to take his eyeball out. Rav Shimon says, okay, we're going to take care of this. So what does Rav Shimon ben Shetach do? There are 80 witches hiding in a cave in Ashkelon. He takes 80 men with him. And it is a rainy day. One other rule of witchcraft is witchcraft doesn't work when you're wet. So I don't know if that's where, they got the whole, Witch of the West was killed with water, throwing a bucket of water on her. I can't tell you if they are familiar with Gemara, but he has the 80 men come on a rainy day, and they have coats. They didn't have Ziploc baggies or any kinds of, vinyl cover-ups, but he had the coats in jars. He said, when I whistle once, change your jackets, put on a dry jacket. When I whistle twice, come and pick the witches up off the ground. There was some kind of a witchcraft that only worked when you were on the ground and grounded. So if they would pick up these witches, they would be rendered powerless. So he comes in and he says to them, let's teach each other some witchcraft. He's like, what do you have? So one witch comes and she conjures up some bread. Another witch does her incantations and she conjures up a platter of food. And another witch conjures up, some wine. And she's like, so what are you going to do? He's like, well, when I whistle, I can get you 80 men and they'll teach you their witchcraft. And they say, okay, go for it. So he whistles, and the 80 men, the all tzaddikim, they all change their coats. And then he whistles again, and they come, and each one picks a witch up off the ground. So now they can't do any witchcraft. And he says, now you try to bring your bread, you try to bring your platter, you try to bring your wine, and they can't. So now that they are rendered powerless, he says, you're all chayav misa, and they killed 80 witches in a day. And that is the famous story. If you've never heard it, I just recently heard it. It was just a really, really fascinating account of Rav Shimon ben Shetach and these witches. So is witchcraft real or not? I don't think that what we have today, any of the magicians are doing anything more than sleight of hand. And that is what Maimonides, the Rambam believed. It was the minority opinion, but he believed that it was sleight of hand, and people who were uneducated were easily duped. People who knew sciences, people who were, quick, were able to dupe other people into following their religions or, politically. And, he really felt that anybody who believed in witchcraft was a fool. And it seems that there are some midrashim that support that. The Malbim said that the magicians during Paro, they changed into, they put snake skins on and wiggled around, and they were just very, very quick. And the Ralbag says it was kind of sleight of hands, but the lice, it was just too small. Like they couldn't do that with their sleight of hands. But this is really the minority opinion. Rashi says that what the Khartoumin did was they used the sorcery with the demons, and they were able to take power over the natural order, but anything smaller than a barley was just, the demons couldn't, they were powerless against it. And the Ramban believed that magic is very real, that Hashem created, when he created the world, there were the upper realms and the lower realms. We have the constellations, the moon, the stars, and the sun, and they have power, kochos, over the natural order of the world. And this is how Hashem wanted the world to run. And what sorcerers, witches, magicians do is they use it and they manipulate it. And this is usher because it's just not the will of Hashem. Now, whether it was real or not, I'm of the belief that yes, it was. We had Nevi'im. Hashem said you have Nevi'im. You have Torah. We have Hashem. We have Tfilos. We have our Kolach Tefila, and we shouldn't need to go in the Chukas Hagayim and copy their practices. It's a lack of emunah. It's a lack of bitachon, and it's kind of like a kofar of what Hashem wanted and how he wanted the world. It could be that as we got further away from Nevuah and Ruach HaKodesh and the power of Torah learning, these great Torah scholars, the powers of magic weakened, and it's just not prevalent anymore. But for those who may be scared, you have a cute little invocation you can use. If you want to have your skula to power against the witches, you have it there. But clearly, when Mashiach comes, we will have all our answers answered, and we can tell them we learned about this, but we never needed to use it. So thank you.
Shani, that was like fascinating. I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
Where was the knowledge? Where did they receive the knowledge of this witchcraft? Like, I can tell you something so interesting. Like, yeah. I can't reveal what tzaddikim it is, but someone recently told me, that tzaddikim aren't allowed to deal with practical Kabbalah. Practical Kabbalah can actually do a lot of things. So somebody recently told me a story about this guy in Eretz Yisrael who had studied intensely on, actually, I don't want to record it.
Okay.
After we finish, actually, I'll tell you.
Okay.
I'll unrecord it and then I'll tell everybody the story because I don't want it to be public.
Sure.
But my question to you is, where did they learn the art? Like, how did they know? Because it didn't come from Kabbalah at that point, right? Did it come from Kabbalah at that point?
Are you talking about the white magic that Sanhedrin knew, or
even any of the witchcraft? Where did it source from?
So I didn't come across it, but I'm going to gander a guess over here. Until the Talmud was chronicled in print, most of what we learned was all auditory. It was all passed down. It was all memorized. Everything was taught and it kind of passed down from generation to generation. My guess would be is that those familiar with the dark arts taught it to somebody else, and it would just sort of be perpetuated like that, the same way that the Sanhedrin and Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai, Masarel Yoshua, Yeshua Lezakanim, and Anshe Knesset Hagadola, and everyone kind of learned it from teaching in that way. That would be my guess, but I can't tell you that that's the
But
answer.
what were they able to access? Like, what was it able to access that they could do then that they wouldn't be able to do today? Would it be just the knowledge, or it is no longer accessible in the world we live in? That's the question.
I don't know. I would think that there are some things that they said. It could be that there were ways of saying it where maybe they were so holy that they could have that kind of power over natural order. Not the Ramban says that there was like an influence heavenly and the lower. I don't know. I really don't know. It's fascinating. It's a question, but I don't know.
It's really fascinating. It's a really fascinating.
We'll learn it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really fascinating. The whole thing is so fascinating.